Have you ever been humiliated by the man you loved in front of another woman? Have you ever felt so small, so insignificant, that you wished you could disappear into the ground? That's exactly how Soo-Yeon felt on the night her entire world shattered into a million pieces. But what her cheating husband didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the woman he had just destroyed in front of his mistress was about to become the most powerful woman in Seoul. And she was going to make him pay for every single tear. The rain poured down on the streets of Gangnam as Soo-Yeon stood frozen outside the glass doors of the exclusive restaurant called La Maison de Luxe. Through the window, she could see her husband of 5 years, Park Jun-soo, laughing with a woman she had never seen before. His hand rested casually on the woman's thigh, his eyes sparkling with an affection he hadn't shown Soo-Yeon in years. Maybe he had never looked at her that way at all. Maybe she had just been too desperate to notice. She had come to surprise him. It was their 5th wedding anniversary, and despite his coldness lately, she had hoped, foolishly, desperately hoped, that a romantic dinner might rekindle something between them. She had spent her last savings on a new dress, a simple blue one that she thought made her look pretty. She had styled her hair the way he used to like it, back when he still noticed her, back when he still came home before midnight, back when he still remembered to say her name. The blue dress had cost her 3 weeks of careful budgeting. She had skipped lunches, walking to the convenience store during her break to buy the cheapest kimbap she could find, then hiding in the bathroom to eat it so her colleagues wouldn't see. She had walked to work instead of taking the bus, even in the summer heat, even when her feet blistered from the cheap shoes she wore. She had saved every one she could, counting coins at night like they were precious gems. Her colleagues had noticed her losing weight. "You look tired," they would say, and she would smile and blame it on a new project at work. They had commented on the dark circles under her eyes. "Are you sleeping enough?" they would ask, and she would laugh and say she had been watching too many dramas late at night. But she had smiled and said she was fine, always fine, because admitting the truth would mean admitting that her perfect marriage was anything but perfect. She remembered the morning she had found this dress in a small boutique near her office. It had been displayed in the window, catching the light in a way that made the simple fabric look almost elegant. The color had reminded her of the sky on the day she and Jun-soo had first met. A clear, brilliant blue that seemed to promise endless possibilities. She had been so hopeful then, standing in front of the mirror in the tiny fitting room, so certain that this dress would help him see her again. Really see her, the way he used to before everything changed. Before he started coming home late. Before he started looking through her instead of at her. Before he stopped saying "I love you" and started saying "I'm busy." Before the silences between them grew so heavy she could barely breathe. And now, watching Jun-soo lean in to whisper something in this stranger's ear, watching the woman giggle and press closer to him, watching his hand move higher on her thigh, Soo-Yeon felt every sacrifice, every hope, every dream crumbled to dust. "Are you going in, miss?" a waiter at the door asked politely, holding an umbrella over his perfectly pressed uniform. Soo-Yeon didn't answer. She couldn't form words. Her feet moved on their own, carrying her through those glass doors, through the elegant dining room with its crystal chandeliers and pristine white tablecloths, until she was standing right beside their table. The restaurant was the kind of place she had always dreamed of visiting, crystal chandeliers casting warm golden light over white tablecloths that looked like fresh snow, the soft murmur of sophisticated conversation in multiple languages, the clink of expensive silverware against fine china that probably cost more than her monthly salary. The air smelled of truffle and aged wine and old money. She had imagined being here with Jun-soo, celebrating their love over champagne and candlelight. She had imagined him looking at her the way he was looking at this other woman right now, with warmth, with desire, with something that looked terrifyingly like affection. Not like this. Never like this. Jun-soo looked up. For a moment, there was something like panic in his eyes, a flash of the man who used to at least pretend to care about being caught. His hand jerked away from the woman's thigh. But the panic was quickly replaced by annoyance. And then, to Soo-Yeon's horror, amusement. As if she were a stray dog that had wandered into a fancy establishment, mildly inconvenient, but ultimately beneath his concern. "Well, well," he said, leaning back in his chair with a smile that made her blood run cold. "Look who decided to show up, Yuna. This is my wife, the one I told you about." He said the word wife the way someone might say cockroach or tax audit, with distaste and mild irritation. The woman, Yuna, looked Soo-Yeon up and down with barely concealed contempt. She was everything Soo-Yeon wasn't. Tall and willowy, where Soo-Yeon was petite and curved, elegant and polished where Soo-Yeon was natural and simple, dripping with designer jewelry that caught the light with every tiny movement. Her perfectly manicured nails, painted blood red to match her lipstick, tapped impatiently on the stem of her wine glass, a glass that probably cost more than Soo-Yeon's entire outfit. Her hair was sleek and perfect, styled in the kind of effortless waves that required 3 hours at a salon. Her makeup was flawless, each contour and highlight precisely placed. Her dress probably cost more than Soo-Yeon made in 3 months of working overtime. Her lips curved into a cruel smile that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Oh, so this is her? The doormat?" Yuna's voice dripped with false sympathy, the kind people use when they want to appear kind while delivering the cruelest blow possible. "That's not very nice," Junsu said, but he was laughing. Actually laughing, his shoulders shaking with genuine amusement, as if this were the funniest thing he had heard all week, as if watching his wife's heart break in real time was entertainment. "She's not a doormat. She's more like furniture. You know, the kind you forget is even there. The kind that just exists in the background, collecting dust, never adding anything of value to the room." The other diners had started to notice. A couple at the next table exchanged uncomfortable glances, the woman's hand reaching for her husband's arm as if seeking comfort from the scene unfolding before them. A businessman in the corner lowered his newspaper to watch. A woman in diamonds whispered something to her companion behind a perfectly manicured hand, her eyes wide with the particular excitement of witnessing someone else's humiliation. Whispers spread through the restaurant like wildfire, a rippling tide of judgment and morbid curiosity. Soo-Yeon felt her face burn with humiliation, every cell in her body screaming at her to run, to hide, to disappear, but she forced herself to speak. "Junsu, it's our anniversary. I thought..." Her voice came out small, pathetic, the voice of a woman who had already lost everything and didn't even know it yet. "You thought what?" He cut her off, his voice suddenly cold as a January wind in the mountains. "That I'd want to spend tonight with you? Look at yourself, Soo-Yeon. Look at what you're wearing." His eyes swept over her dress. The dress she had sacrificed so much to buy, the dress she had chosen because it reminded her of hope, with undisguised disdain. "Do you think that cheap dress from some street market can compare to what Yuna is wearing? Her bag alone costs more than your entire wardrobe," Yuna added with a tinkling laugh that sounded like broken glass. She lifted her Hermes Birkin demonstratively, turning it so the light caught the gold hardware, so everyone could see the exclusive stamp that marked it as authentic. "This is what real taste looks like. This is what Junsu deserves. Quality, elegance, breeding. But I suppose you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Poor little orphan playing dress-up in clothes she can't afford." She tisked sympathetically, the sound dripping with poison. How sad. She knew. This woman knew about her past. That meant Junsu had told her, had sat across from his mistress and mocked his wife's painful childhood as entertainment, had shared the deepest wounds of her heart as pillow talk, had betrayed not just her body, but her soul. The betrayal cut deeper than she could have imagined, deeper than any physical wound. Soo-Yeon's hands trembled. She clasped them together to hide it, pressing her nails into her palms until the pain gave her something to focus on, besides the agony in her chest. I did my best. I wanted to look nice for you. Your best? Junsu stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor with a sound that silenced the nearby tables like a gunshot. Every eye in the restaurant was on them now. Every ear was straining to catch his words. Your best is an embarrassment. Everything about you is an embarrassment. Do you have any idea how tired I am of explaining to my colleagues why my wife looks like a secretary? Why she has no connections, no powerful family to leverage, no money of her own to contribute to our lifestyle? I work hard, she began, her voice barely a whisper. You work as a junior designer at a mid-level company that nobody has ever heard of, and nobody ever will. His voice rose with each word, carrying through the restaurant for everyone to hear. That's not working hard. That's barely surviving. That's being a nobody pretending to be something more. That's existing in the world without leaving any mark at all. He grabbed her arm roughly, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to leave bruises, pulling her closer so he could hiss in her ear while still performing for their audience. I married you because I thought you had potential. I thought your creative talent would amount to something. That you'd make connections, build a name, bring something to this marriage besides your pretty face. I thought you'd be grateful enough to actually make something of yourself, to prove you deserved the Park family name. But 5 years later, you're still nobody. A complete and utter nobody. And I'm done wasting my time on a lost cause like you. The grip on her arm was painful, his fingers digging into her flesh with a cruelty she had never seen from him before, or maybe had just refused to see. The pain radiated up her arm and into her shoulder, but the words hurt more. They sank into her like knives, finding every insecurity, every fear, every wound she had spent a lifetime trying to heal. She had heard variations of this before. Late nights when he came home smelling of alcohol and perfume that wasn't hers. Mornings when he looked at her like she was an unwelcome guest in her own home. Evenings when he critiqued her appearance until she wanted to disappear. But he had never been this public, this cruel, this determined to destroy her in front of witnesses. He shoved her backward with enough force to make her stumble, her heel catching on the marble floor. Soo-Yeon caught herself on a nearby table, her hip hitting the edge painfully, a wine glass wobbling dangerously before settling. The elderly couple sitting there gasped, the woman reaching out instinctively to help steady her, genuine concern in her aged eyes. But her husband pulled her back, shaking his head slightly. Don't get involved. Stay out of it. No one actually moved to intervene. No one ever did. That was the rule in places like this. Watch the spectacle, remember every detail for the gossip, but never, ever get your hands dirty by helping. Get out, Junsu said loudly, for everyone to hear. His voice echoed through the suddenly silent restaurant, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers and fine artwork. Go home and pack your things. All of them. I want a divorce. Junsu, please. Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. She was begging in front of all these strangers, begging a man who was looking at her with nothing but disgust and contempt and maybe, worst of all, boredom. Can we talk about this somewhere private? Please don't do this here. Did you hear me? His voice rose to a shout that made even the servers freeze in place, trays balanced precariously in their hands. I said, get out. Stop embarrassing me. Stop embarrassing yourself. No one wants you here. No one has ever wanted you. Not your parents who abandoned you. Not your aunt who raised you. And certainly not me. The words hit her like physical blows, each one landing with devastating precision on the deepest wounds of her soul. No one has ever wanted you. Her aunt's voice echoed from her childhood, saying nearly the same thing countless times. You're a burden. You're in the way. No one asked for you to exist. Your parents left you because they knew you were worthless, because they took one look at you and knew you would never amount to anything. Yuna stood up gracefully, wrapping herself around Junsu's arm like a beautiful snake claiming its prey. Honey, let her go. She's not worth your anger. She's not worth any emotion at all. Some people are just born to be nothing. It's not their fault, really. It's just biology. Some people are meant to shine, and some people are meant to fade into the background. She's a fader. Always has been. Always will be. You can't polish a rock and expect it to become a diamond. Soo-Yeon looked at them, at her husband holding another woman possessively, proudly, at the restaurant full of wealthy, powerful people staring at her with pity and disgust and thinly veiled entertainment, at her own reflection in the dark window. Small, pathetic, trembling, her cheap blue dress suddenly feeling like a costume, like a lie she had told herself, like the uniform of her own inadequacy. Something inside her broke. Not her heart. That had been breaking slowly for years, dying by inches with every cruel word and cold silence. Something else. Something deeper. Something that had been holding her together through sheer force of will. She turned and walked out of the restaurant with as much dignity as she could muster, which wasn't much. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else, wooden and uncooperative. The glass doors swung shut behind her with a soft whisper, and she stepped out into the rain that had only grown heavier, as if the sky itself was crying for her, as if the heavens had decided to mourn what she couldn't let herself mourn yet. She walked. She didn't know where she was going. Just away, somewhere, anywhere that wasn't here. The streets of Gangnam blurred around her. Designer boutiques with their glittering window displays showcasing mannequins and clothes that cost more than she made in a year. Luxury cars splashing through puddles without slowing for pedestrians. Couples walking arm in arm under shared umbrellas laughing at private jokes. Everyone had someone. Everyone belonged somewhere. Everyone had a place in this world that made sense. Except her. Her phone buzzed in her purse, insistent and angry. A message from Jun-soo. Don't forget to leave your apartment key on the table. And don't try to take anything that isn't yours, which is basically everything. His apartment, his table, his everything. After 5 years of marriage, it was still his apartment, his life, his world that she had merely been permitted to occupy temporarily. She had never been anything more than a guest in her own life, a visitor in a home that was never really hers, a placeholder waiting to be replaced by someone better. She kept walking until her legs gave out in a dark alley behind a row of luxury boutiques. There, surrounded by trash and the smell of rotting food and cardboard boxes that homeless people had used for shelter, she finally let herself cry. The rain soaked through her cheap blue dress, her hopeful, stupid, worthless blue dress, plastering it to her skin like a second layer of shame. Her carefully styled hair hung limp around her face in tangled strands. Mascara ran in dark streaks down her cheeks like war paint, like the marks of a battle she had already lost. "Why?" she whispered to no one, to the rain, to the indifferent city that surrounded her. "Why am I always alone? Why does no one ever choose me?" She had been an orphan for as long as she could remember. Her earliest memory was of a stern woman, her aunt, telling her to be quiet, to be good, to be grateful for the roof over her head and the scraps on her plate. The aunt who raised her had made it clear from the very beginning that Soo-Yeon was nothing but an obligation, a burden, a mouth to feed that gave nothing in return. "Your mother left you on my doorstep," her aunt had said countless times, usually when she was drunk or angry or both. No note, no explanation, no forwarding address. She didn't even want you enough to say goodbye, to leave you a name, to give you a reason. What does that tell you about your worth? What does that say about what you deserve in this life? Soo-Yeon had worked her way through school, studying late into the night while other girls went to parties and gossiped about boys and dreamed of romance. She had earned scholarships through sheer determination, spending hours in the library while her classmates shopped for pretty clothes. She had earned her degree, despite her aunt's constant reminders that she was wasting time, that she should get a job at a factory instead of pursuing ridiculous dreams above her station. She had built what she thought was a decent life, brick by painful brick, fighting for every small victory. She had believed that marrying Jun-soo meant she finally had a family, Finally had someone who would never leave her. Finally had a place where she belonged. She had believed in happy endings, in the power of love to transform, in the possibility of being wanted. She had been so wrong. The rain intensified, if that was even possible, falling in sheets that turned the alley into a river. Soo-Yeon drew her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible, trying to disappear into the darkness, and cried until she had no tears left. She didn't know how long she sat there. Minutes, hours, a lifetime. Time had lost all meaning in the face of such complete despair. That's when she heard it. The sound of expensive leather shoes splashing through puddles, getting closer, deliberate footsteps that didn't hurry despite the rain. Miss, are you all right? She looked up, rain streaming down her face, to see a man standing over her, holding a large black umbrella that probably cost more than her month's rent. He was tall, impossibly handsome in a sharp, severe way, with features that looked like they had been carved from marble. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes that seemed to see right through her pretenses and defenses to the broken person underneath. There was something familiar about his face. She had seen it somewhere before, maybe in a magazine or on television, or in the business section of a newspaper she couldn't afford to buy. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, perfectly tailored to fit his athletic frame, and behind him stood two men in black. Bodyguards, she realized dimly, the kind that only the very wealthy and very powerful had. I'm fine, she said automatically, the lie coming out in a croak, the same lie she had told 1,000 times before. Please, just leave me alone. The man frowned. It was a surprisingly concerned expression on such a severe face, softening his sharp features into something almost human. You're sitting in the rain behind a garbage bin in designer shoes that are completely ruined. That doesn't seem fine to me. It's none of your business. Perhaps not, he agreed, his voice deep and measured. He studied her for a long moment, rain dripping from his umbrella, and something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Calculation? Something she couldn't name? But I can't walk away from someone who looks like they've lost everything. Call it a character flaw. Because you know what that feels like? Soo-Yeon laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and ugly in the rainy alley. Look at you. Your suit alone could pay my rent for a year. Your watch probably costs more than my entire life. You've probably never lost anything in your entire privileged existence. The man's expression didn't change, but his voice softened almost imperceptibly. You'd be surprised what I've lost. He extended his hand, palm up, waiting. At least let me call you a taxi. You'll get sick sitting out here, and pneumonia is a terrible way to spend a week. She should have refused. Every instinct honed by a lifetime of disappointment told her to push this stranger away, to crawl back into her misery where it was safe, where no one could disappoint her because she expected nothing. Strangers weren't kind without reason. Her aunt had taught her that early and often. Handsome men in expensive suits didn't help crying women in alleys unless they wanted something. There was always a catch, always a price, always a betrayal waiting in the wings. But something about his eyes, something steady and unexpectedly kind, something that reminded her of the father she had never known, the father she had dreamed about in her childhood fantasies, made her reach out and take his hand. His grip was warm and firm, solid and reassuring. He pulled her to her feet effortlessly, his strength evident but gentle, then shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders before she could protest. The jacket was impossibly warm despite the rain, lined with silk that felt like a whisper against her skin, and it smelled faintly of expensive cologne and something else, something clean and safe and masculine. Sir, your jacket... One of the bodyguards started, concern evident in his voice. That jacket was probably worth more than a small car. It's fine. The man's voice brooked no argument. He pulled out his phone with the casual efficiency of someone who was used to making things happen. Secretary Kim, send a car to Cheongdam-dong, behind the Galleria. Immediately. The black sedan. Within minutes, a sleek black car pulled up at the mouth of the alley. A Mercedes Maybach, Soo-Yeon noted numbly. The kind of car she had only seen in magazines and daydreams, with tinted windows that promised privacy, and a driver in a formal uniform who jumped out to open the door. The man walked her to the car and opened the back door for her himself, ignoring the rain that was now soaking his white shirt. Where do you live? Soo-Yeon hesitated. Go home? To the apartment she had shared with Jun-soo for 5 years, where she would have to pack her things like a discarded servant, while he probably brought that woman, Yuna with her red nails and poisonous smile, back to sleep in their bed, in the sheets Soo-Yeon had washed just that morning? The thought made her stomach turn, made bile rise in her throat. I don't have anywhere to go, she admitted. The words felt shameful, like admitting ultimate defeat, like confirming everything Jun-soo had said about her being worthless. Not tonight, maybe not ever. The man studied her again with those piercing, intelligent eyes, his gaze assessing but not judgmental. Then he made a decision. She could see it happen. The slight shift in his posture, the almost imperceptible nod, the way his jaw set with quiet determination. Take her to the Grand Hyatt, presidential suite. Put it on my account, and arrange for anything she might need. Clothes, toiletries, food, the best of everything. Sir, the bodyguard started again, clearly wanting to protest this generosity to a complete stranger. Do it. Soo-Yeon stared at him, water dripping from her hair onto the leather seats. I can't accept that. I don't even know who you are. And the presidential suite at the Grand Hyatt, that must cost millions of won per night. I could work for a year and not afford a single night there. My name is Kang Min-jae. He said it simply, as if the name meant nothing, but the bodyguards immediately stiffened to attention like soldiers before a general. The driver's spine straightened. Even Soo-Yeon, in her state of shock and exhaustion, felt the weight of that name settle over her like a heavy blanket. Kang, one of the most powerful families in Korea, one of the wealthiest families in all of Asia. The name behind Hansun Group, behind half the buildings in Seoul's skyline. You can pay me back someday if you prefer, he continued, his voice matter of fact. Or don't. It doesn't matter to me. For now, just get some rest. Eat something. Sleep. Things will look different in the morning. They always do. Why are you helping me? What do you want? Because there was always something. There was always a price. He smiled. Just slightly, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his severe face into something almost warm, almost human, almost beautiful. Let's call it a whim. I'm known for my whims. They make the business pages worry. His smile faded, replaced by something more serious. But also. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Simple cream paper, elegant embossing, nothing flashy but everything expensive. I saw your design portfolio 6 months ago. It was submitted to Hansun Group's design competition. You didn't win. The judges were looking for something safe, something conventional, something boring. But your work stayed with me. It was exceptional, truly exceptional. Soo-Yeon's eyes widened. The Hansung competition. That's the biggest design competition in Asia. There were over 10,000 entries from designers all over the world. I never thought anyone actually looked at the ones that didn't win. I didn't even make the shortlist. The judges were wrong, he said simply, with the confidence of a man who was rarely wrong himself. Your portfolio showed a vision I haven't seen in 20 years of working in this industry. The way you combined traditional Korean elements with modern functionality, the way you respected heritage while pushing boundaries, the innovative use of sustainable materials. It was innovative, bold, different. It made me want to know who created it, to meet the mind behind those designs. He pressed the card into her cold hand, his fingers briefly warm against hers. Get some rest. And when you're ready to stop letting the world destroy you, call me. I think you have more potential than you realize. Much more. The car door closed with the soft thunk of expensive engineering. As they pulled away from the alley, Soo-Yeon looked back through the rain-streaked window. Kang Min-jae stood watching in the rain, his white shirt now completely soaked, his bodyguards holding umbrellas they clearly wished he would use, his silhouette dark against the glittering lights of Gangnam. He didn't move until the car turned the corner, and he was out of sight. She didn't know then that he was the CEO of the largest conglomerate in South Korea. She didn't know that he had spent months trying to track down the anonymous designer who had submitted that portfolio, that he had hired investigators and sorted through databases, that he had been searching for her even before fate brought them together in that alley. She didn't know that this chance encounter, if it was chance at all, would change everything. All she knew was that for the first time in 5 years, maybe for the first time in her entire life, someone had looked at her and seen something worth saving. The presidential suite at the Grand Hyatt was larger than the entire apartment she had shared with Jun-soo. Soo-Yeon stood in the doorway for a full minute, afraid to touch anything, afraid to track water on the pristine floors, afraid this dream would shatter if she moved an inch. There were fresh flowers on every table, roses and lilies and orchids in cascading arrangements that looked like works of art, that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. A fruit basket overflowed with grapes and mangoes and fruits she couldn't even name. Exotic offerings from countries she had never visited. A selection of designer toiletries filled the bathroom counter. Aesop and La Mer and Joe Malone and brands she had only ever seen in magazine advertisements. The closet was stocked with basic clothing in various sizes, all bearing designer labels, Armani, Dior, Chanel, as if expensive clothes just naturally appeared for guests at this level. The bed was the size of a small room, piled high with pillows that looked like clouds, covered in sheets that were probably Egyptian cotton, with thread counts she couldn't fathom. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the entire city spread out below her like a glittering tapestry. All of Seoul, millions of lives, billions of one, endless possibilities, stretching to the mountains on the horizon. This was what wealth looked like. Real wealth. Not the pretend wealth of Jun-soo's family, who drove leased cars and lived in mortgaged penthouses and spent money they didn't have to impress people they didn't like. This was the kind of wealth that didn't need to prove anything, that simply existed in quiet, confident abundance. In this room, everything she owned, everything she had ever owned in her entire 30 years of life, would fit in one small corner and still leave space to spare. She showered for an hour, standing under water pressure that was better than any massage she had ever received, letting the hot water wash away the rain and the tears and the memory of Jun-soo's cruel words. She used the expensive shampoo that smelled like jasmine and vanilla, and the thick white towels that were softer than anything she had ever touched, and the robe that felt like being wrapped in a cloud of silk. Then she curled up on the enormous bed, sinking into mattress that probably cost more than a car, and stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of this impossible night. For the first time in years, maybe the first time ever, she let herself think about her life. Really think about it, without the rose-colored glasses she had worn for so long, without the desperate optimism that had kept her going through disappointment after disappointment. Jun-soo had never loved her. That was clear now, as clear as the rain that still streaked the windows. She had known it somewhere deep inside, in the place where unpleasant truths lived alongside childhood traumas and midnight fears, but she had refused to acknowledge it. She had built an elaborate fortress of denial and called it hope. He had married her because she was pretty enough to look good on his arm at company events, and talented enough that he thought she might be useful someday, and most importantly, malleable. He had enjoyed molding her, shaping her opinions to match his, controlling her choices about clothes and friends and career, slowly crushing her spirit until she believed she was nothing without him. He had isolated her from what few friends she had, criticized her until she doubted her own perceptions, made her grateful for crumbs of affection that any decent person would give freely. She remembered their wedding day, how he had criticized her dress for being too simple, her makeup for being too natural, her lack of family for being embarrassing, how he had complained loudly about the cost of the ceremony while simultaneously insisting on impressing his colleagues with expensive champagne they couldn't afford, how their honeymoon had been cut short after just 3 days so he could return for a business meeting that turned out to be drinks with friends, leaving her alone in Jeju Island to wander the beaches like a ghost. She remembered the first time he had called her stupid, 2 months into their marriage. She had made a joke about a politician's speech, a clever observation that her co-workers would have laughed at, and he had looked at her with such contempt, such disgust. "Don't try to be clever," he had said, his voice dripping with condescension. "It doesn't suit you. Leave the thinking to people who are good at it." She had stopped making jokes after that, stopped sharing her opinions, stopped being anything but agreeable. She remembered the first time he had stayed out all night without calling, 6 months into their marriage. She had been frantic, imagining car accidents and hospital rooms and police notifications. She had called hospitals, called his office, nearly called the police. When he finally came home at dawn, smelling of alcohol and cigarettes and a perfume that wasn't hers, he had laughed at her worry. "I was with colleagues," he had said, not even bothering to lie convincingly. "Don't be so clingy. It's unattractive." She had learned not to ask questions after that, learned to pretend she didn't notice the lipstick stains and the late nights and the credit card charges to hotels. She remembered the first time she had found lipstick on his collar that wasn't her shade, a deep red, exactly like the one Yuna had been wearing tonight. She had been doing laundry on a Sunday morning, her hands in soapy water, and there it was, proof of betrayal in crimson. She had stared at it for a long time, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. And then she had done his laundry and pretended not to see. She had been pretending ever since, building her own prison cell bar by bar. Her job, she was good at it, better than good. Her designs had won small competitions, earned praise from clients, shown promise that her colleagues noticed. But she had been passed over for promotions again and again, always watching less talented men climb the ladder above her. Her boss, a man who looked at her chest more often than her designs, always had excuses. "You're too quiet," he would say, as if volume determined competence. "You need to network more," as if her work didn't speak for itself. "Maybe next quarter. Always next quarter. Always tomorrow. Always never." She had accepted these explanations because she had been taught to accept, to be grateful for any opportunity, to never demand what she deserved, to take what was given and say thank you. Her life was small, tiny, a cage she had built with her own hands because she was too afraid to reach for anything more, too convinced of her own worthlessness to believe she deserved better. But tonight, a stranger, Kang Min-jae, CEO of Hansung Group, one of the most powerful men in Korea, had looked at her design portfolio and called it exceptional. Tonight, a stranger had seen her sitting in the rain like a discarded piece of trash, and instead of walking by the way everyone else did, he had stopped. Maybe she wasn't nothing. Maybe she had just forgotten who she was, lost herself so gradually that she didn't notice until there was nothing left to lose. Soo-Yeon picked up Kang Min-jae's business card and stared at it for a long time. The card was simple, but elegant. Thick cream-colored paper with his name and phone number embossed in black. Kang Min-jae, CEO, Hansung Group. Just those words, nothing more, nothing flashy. As if everyone would already know who he was, as if his name alone was introduction enough. She set it carefully on the nightstand, right where she could see it, a small beacon of possibility in the darkness of her despair. Then she turned off the light, pulled the incredibly soft sheets up to her chin, and for the first time in years, slept without dreaming of escape. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and a knock at the door. A hotel staff member in a crisp uniform wheeled in a breakfast cart loaded with more food than she could eat in a week. Fresh fruit arranged like a sculpture, pastries that smelled like heaven, eggs prepared 3 different ways, fresh squeezed juice in multiple flavors, coffee from beans that probably cost more per pound than her monthly grocery budget. "Compliments of Mr. Kang," the staff member said with a deep bow, his voice respectful, in a way service staff had never been respectful to her before. There was also a garment bag hanging beside the door, heavy with promise. Inside was a simple but elegant dress, cream-colored, perfectly tailored, clearly expensive in that understated way that whispered money rather than shouting it. The fabric was so soft it felt like water against her skin, like being touched by a cloud. There was no note, but Soo-Yeon understood the message, armor for whatever battle she was about to face. She ate breakfast slowly, letting herself enjoy every bite without guilt for the first time in years, savoring flavors she had never experienced, textures she had never imagined. Then she dressed in the new clothes, styled her hair neatly using the luxury products in the bathroom, and looked at herself in the full-length mirror. She looked different. Not like a different person, like the person she had always been underneath, finally allowed to emerge. The dress fit her perfectly, accentuating her figure in a way her old clothes never had, making her look elegant and capable and worthy. Her posture was straighter, her chin was higher, her eyes held something that looked almost like determination. This was who she could be. This was who she would become. Her phone was flooded with messages from Jun-soo, increasingly angry, increasingly demanding, increasingly revealing of his true character now that he had no reason to hide it. The last one read, "Make sure you're gone by the time Yuna arrives for dinner. She's moving in. Leave the key and anything of value." Anything of value. After 5 years, that's all she was to him. A keeper of keys and valuable items, a departing servant expected to inventory the silverware. Soo-Yeon smiled, a real smile, sharp and dangerous, a smile that had been hiding inside her all along, a smile that would have terrified Jun-soo if he had seen it. "We'll see about that," she murmured to her reflection. She arrived at the apartment building at exactly 3 p.m. The doorman's eyes widened at her transformation, the expensive dress, the confident stride, the gleaming black car that had dropped her off and waited at the curb like a silent promise. "Mrs. Park, you look different today." "It's Ms. Han now," she corrected him, her voice steady and sure. "Ms. Kang, actually, and I won't be long." The elevator ride to the penthouse felt different. The mirrors that had always made her cringe, adjusting her hair anxiously, checking her makeup with worried eyes, rehearsing apologies for imagined failures, now showed a woman standing tall, shoulders back, chin raised, eyes clear and determined. The cheap blue dress was gone forever, replaced by elegant cream that fit like it had been made for her. The desperate need for approval that had clouded her eyes for years had been replaced by something colder, something harder, something infinitely better. She let herself into the apartment with her key for the last time. Jun-soo was on the couch, laptop open, probably working on some deal that made him feel important. He looked up when she entered, and genuine surprise flickered across his face. Surprise and something else. Something that looked almost like regret before he buried it under arrogance. "Where did you get those clothes? Did you steal something from a store?" "A friend lent them to me." She walked past him toward the bedroom, her heels clicking on the marble floor he had always criticized her for not keeping clean enough. "What friend? You don't have friends. You don't have anyone." The words should have hurt. 24 hours ago, they would have devastated her. Now she just felt tired of him, tired of this apartment, tired of the woman she had been. "You're right," she said, pulling a small suitcase from the closet. "I don't have friends. I have 3 brothers." Junsu laughed. That sharp, disbelieving sound that had mocked her so many times before. Brothers? You told me you were an orphan, raised by an aunt who couldn't wait to get rid of you. That's what I believe too. That's the lie I lived with for 23 years. She began folding her meager possessions, mostly work clothes and a few books, all of it fitting easily into one small suitcase with room to spare. It was sad, really, how little she had accumulated in 5 years of marriage. But I found out something interesting recently. I'm not an orphan. I'm adopted. And my biological family, my real family, has been looking for me for 23 years. What are you talking about? She paused in her packing, turning to face him fully. He looked the same as always, handsome in that conventional way that had once made her heart race, well-dressed, confident. But there was something different about how she saw him now. Before, she had looked at him and seen security, belonging, a future worth sacrificing for. Now she just saw a small man who made himself feel big by making others feel small. A bully in a nice suit. Does the name Kang sound familiar to you, Junsu? His face went pale, the blood draining so fast she could see it happen. Kang? As in Hansung Group? The richest family in Korea? The Kang family? The very same. Soo-Yeon picked up a photograph from the dresser, one of her and Junsu on their wedding day. She studied it, herself smiling too hard, trying desperately to project happiness, him not even looking at the camera, checking his phone, already bored with her before the marriage had even begun. She placed it face down. Apparently, I was kidnapped as an infant. My mother died from the grief of losing me. My father and my 3 brothers never stopped searching, never gave up hope, never forgot me. This is ridiculous. You're making this up. This is some kind of revenge fantasy. Am I? She pulled out her phone and showed him a document, a DNA test, processed by one of the most reputable labs in Korea, witnessed by lawyers from 3 different firms. The results were clear, unambiguous, undeniable. She was a 99% match for Kang Sung-ho, chairman of Hansung Group, and his 3 sons. My eldest brother, Kang Jae-won, is the CEO of Hansung Holdings. My second brother, Kang Min-jae, runs Hansung Group's domestic operations. He's the one who found me, actually, crying in an alley behind a restaurant after my husband humiliated me in public. My youngest brother, Kang Tae-hyun, manages their international ventures. Combined, they control assets worth over $50 billion, and they're very, very protective of their baby sister. Junsu's face went from pale to gray, the color of old ash. His hand shook visibly as he stared at the DNA results. This can't be real. The doorbell rang. That would be them now, Soo-Yeon said, and she couldn't keep the satisfaction out of her voice. She opened the door to reveal 3 men in suits that cost more than Junsu's entire apartment, their faces hard as granite, their postures radiating power and controlled fury. Behind them stood a team of lawyers and assistants holding tablets and folders, ready for whatever came next. Sister, the eldest said, his voice gentle despite his intimidating presence. Are you ready to come home? Almost, brother. I just need 1 more minute. She turned back to Junsu, who had backed himself against the far wall, as if he could escape through it. His face was the color of old milk, his confidence completely evaporated. My brother's company was considering acquiring Park Industries, your father's company, the one you're set to inherit, the one your whole identity is wrapped up in. They were going to offer a generous price, a fair deal, but I think they've changed their minds about the terms. What? You can't. My family's company. We've been building it for 3 generations. Actually, Min-jae stepped forward, his voice cold enough to freeze water in summer. We can, and we will. The acquisition will proceed, but under significantly less favorable terms. Consider it a lesson in how to treat people, in the consequences of cruelty, in the price of arrogance. Junsu's face contorted between rage and terror. Soo-Yeon, please, we can work this out. I didn't mean what I said. You were exactly what you've always been. A small man who only feels big when making others feel small. She picked up her suitcase. I spent 5 years believing I was nothing because you told me so every day. But that's over now. I'm Kang Soo-Yeon, and I don't need anything from you. Not your approval, not your affection, not your pathetic excuses. She paused at the door. Oh, and Junsu? That woman you're bringing to dinner, Yuna with the red nails and the cruel smile. She's been selling your company's trade secrets to your competitors for the past year. We have all the evidence, the documents, the wire transfers, the recorded conversations. Enjoy your evening. She closed the door on his horrified face and walked into her new life without looking back. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Now, let's see what happens as Soo-Yeon transforms into the woman she was always meant to be. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change that Soo-Yeon could barely comprehend. She moved into her family's estate, a compound in the most exclusive neighborhood in Seoul that made Junsu's penthouse look like a college dormitory. The main house alone had 32 rooms. There was a garden designed by a famous landscape architect that had won international awards, a private art gallery housing works worth more than some countries' GDPs, an indoor pool with a retractable roof, a staff of 20 people whose entire job was to make sure the Kang family wanted for nothing. She had her own wing, with a bedroom larger than any apartment she had ever lived in, a private sitting room, a study filled with design books she had always dreamed of owning, a closet bigger than the restaurant where Junsu had humiliated her. But more than the wealth, more than the luxury that still made her dizzy, there was family. She met her father, Kang Sung-ho, on her second day at the estate. He was a silver-haired man with kind eyes that had seen too much sorrow, a gentle manner that belied his reputation as one of the shrewdest businessmen in Asia. He had spent 23 years searching for his stolen daughter, hiring investigators on 3 continents, following leads that went nowhere, putting up rewards that were never claimed, never giving up hope even when everyone around him said it was time to move on, time to accept, time to let go. Their first meeting was in his private study, a room filled with books in 4 languages and photographs of a woman Soo-Yeon had never known, but whose face was somehow familiar. Her own face, softened by happiness and age. He had stood when she entered, his tall frame still straight despite his years, and she had seen the tears forming in his eyes before he could hide them. Soo-Yeon, he had whispered, her name like a prayer on his lips, like a word he had been waiting to say for 23 years. My little star, you've finally come home. She hadn't known what to say. This man, this powerful, wealthy, legendary man who commanded empires and shaped economies, was her father. And he was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the universe. She never stopped believing you were alive, he told her later, sitting across from her in matching armchairs, a fire crackling in a fireplace bigger than her old living room. Tears streamed down his weathered face as he spoke of her mother, your mother. Even when the police said to give up, even when the investigators said it was hopeless, even when I was ready to collapse under the weight of grief, she kept searching. She kept hoping. She kept your room exactly as it was, your crib made up with fresh sheets every week, your toys dusted, your clothes laundered. She used to sit in there for hours, talking to you as if you could hear. What happened to her? She died 3 years after you were taken. The doctors called it heart failure, but I know the truth. Her heart was broken. She died of grief, of hope deferred too long, of loving too much. He reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. Her last words were your name. She made me promise to never stop looking. and I never did." Soo-Yeon cried for the mother she had never known, for the childhood that had been stolen from her, for the years of loneliness that could have been filled with family, for the woman who had loved her so much that the loss had killed her. But she also learned something else in those weeks, something unexpected. How to be strong. Not the false strength of pretending everything was fine, but real strength. The kind that came from knowing your worth, from standing in your power, from refusing to shrink yourself for anyone. Her brothers were ruthless in business but fiercely protective of her. Jae-won, the eldest, taught her about corporate strategy and the art of negotiation, spending hours in his office explaining the subtleties of deals and power plays. He was serious and reserved, all business, but she caught him smiling when she mastered a particularly complex concept. Min-jae, the one who had found her, showed her how to command a room just by walking into it. He taught her about presence and confidence, about the power of silence and the art of the pause. "People will try to diminish you," he told her during one of their sessions. "They'll use your past against you, try to make you feel small. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing it work. Your value isn't determined by other people's opinions." Tae-hyun, the youngest and most playful, helped her navigate the social world she was now part of. He knew everyone and everything, who was important, who was dangerous, who could be trusted, who was just waiting for a chance to stab you in the back. He made her laugh, something she had almost forgotten how to do. They introduced her to the best designers for her wardrobe, the best stylists for her hair, the best trainers for the physical confidence she had never been allowed to develop. Within a month, she had transformed from a timid junior designer into someone people noticed, not because of her family name, but because of the confidence radiating from within. More importantly, they encouraged her to pursue her own dreams. Not their dreams for her, but her dreams, the ones she had buried so deep she had forgotten they existed. "You have real talent," Min-jae told her one evening, reviewing her design portfolio in his corner office overlooking the city. "The question is what you want to do with it. Not what Jun-soo wanted, not what your old boss expected. What do you want?" "I want to start my own company," she admitted, the words feeling foreign and frightening and thrilling on her tongue. "A design firm, something that helps people like the person I used to be. Talented but invisible, with no connections to get their work seen, no advantages except their own ability. Then do it." He handed her a black credit card with the Kang family crest embossed in gold. "This is an investment from the Kang family. No strings attached, no expectations except one. Make us proud. Build something that matters." She did. Within 6 months, Kang Design Studio had become the most talked about new firm in Seoul. Soo-Yeon personally mentored young designers, giving opportunities to those who had been overlooked and underestimated just like she had been. She hired the intern everyone said was too quiet. She hired the designer whose portfolio was rejected for being too different. And she hired the woman who had been told she was too old to start over. She gave them chances, and one by one they proved everyone wrong. It was at Seoul Design Week that everything came together. The event was the biggest in the industry, attracting designers, celebrities, and business leaders from around the world. Kang Design Studio had been given a prime exhibition space, a sign of respect that would have been unthinkable a year ago. She arrived at the venue in a gown of her own design, midnight blue silk that moved like water, with subtle silver embroidery that caught the light like scattered stars. Her hair was swept up elegantly, and she wore diamonds that had belonged to her mother, diamonds her father had saved for 23 years, waiting for this moment. Ms. Kang, over here." Photographers swarmed as she walked the red carpet, flashbulbs popping like fireworks. She smiled graciously, posed for pictures, answered questions with the poise her brothers had taught her. The headlines tomorrow would celebrate her as the rising star of Korean design, and as the long-lost heiress who had taken the business world by storm. But the real drama was waiting inside. She had just finished greeting a group of industry leaders when she heard a familiar voice, one that made her spine stiffen and her hands clench reflexively. "Excuse me, you're in my way." She turned slowly, savoring the moment. There stood Park Jun-soo, looking considerably worse than when she had last seen him. His suit was expensive but poorly fitted. Had he lost weight from stress? His face was gaunt and pale, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights or excessive drinking or both. "Jun-soo," she said, keeping her voice perfectly neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." His face twisted through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Shock at her transformation, anger at her success, regret at what he had lost. "Soo-Yeon, I heard about your company. Congratulations." "Thank you. How is Park Industries?" It was a cruel question, and she knew it. Everyone in the business world knew the answer. After Yuna's corporate espionage was exposed, thanks to evidence provided anonymously to prosecutors, the company had nearly collapsed. Investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. Contracts were canceled overnight. Jun-soo's father had suffered a massive heart attack from the stress and was still in intensive care. The Kang family's acquisition had proceeded at a fraction of the original price, leaving the Parks with nothing but debt and shame. "We're managing," Jun-soo said through gritted teeth. He grabbed her arm, the same arm he had grabbed that night in the restaurant, the same place where his fingerprints had left bruises. "Please. I made a mistake. I was stupid. I was blind. You were cruel." She removed his hand calmly, finger by finger, as if touching something unclean. "You humiliated me in front of a restaurant full of strangers. You told me I was nothing, that no one had ever wanted me. Do you remember that? I was wrong. You were honest. For the first time in our marriage, you said exactly what you thought of me." She met his eyes without flinching. "And you know what? You were right about one thing. The woman I was back then was weak, but she's gone now, and she's never coming back. Soo-Yeon, please. My company just signed a contract with your former biggest client. My brothers own the building where your company used to have headquarters. And this dress I'm wearing?" She smiled. "It's going to be on the cover of Vogue Korea next month." She walked away without looking back, leaving him standing alone in a crowd that was already whispering about his downfall. 1 year later, Soo-Yeon stood on the rooftop of Hansung Group's headquarters, looking out at the Seoul skyline. The wind played with her hair, now cut stylishly short, in a way that made her feel powerful and free. "I have news," she told Min-jae. Kang Design Studio just won the contract for the Olympic Village renovation project. His eyes widened, a major display of emotion for her usually stoic brother. "That was the most competitive bid in years. Every major firm in Asia wanted it. I know. We won on merit." The shareholders' meeting that followed changed everything. Their father announced her as an official heir to Hansung Group, and she gave a speech that went viral within hours of its broadcast. "To anyone out there who feels invisible, worthless, trapped," she said, her voice strong and clear, "your circumstances do not determine your destiny. The people who tell you that you're nothing are wrong. They're projecting their own smallness onto you. You have value. You have potential. You have the power to change your life. All you need is the courage to take the first step, and then another, and another, until you've walked yourself into a completely new world." The Kang Soo-Yeon Foundation launched 6 months later. Within its first year, it had helped over 10,000 people rebuild their lives. Scholarships for students from difficult backgrounds, training programs for women escaping abusive relationships, startup grants for entrepreneurs who had been rejected by traditional funding. 2 years after that rainy night, at the annual Hansung Group Charity Gala, Jun-soo appeared one final time. He was broken, desperate, a shadow of the arrogant man who had once told her she was nothing. "Please," he begged, falling to his knees in the middle of the ballroom. "You have to help me. I've lost everything. My company, my home. My family won't speak to me. If you want to see how this story ends, Subscribe to the channel now. Trust me, you don't want to miss the conclusion. She looked at him, this man who had once been her entire world, and felt nothing. No satisfaction at his downfall. No vindication. No love, no hate. Just nothing. He had become as small and insignificant as he had always tried to make her feel. "Stand up," she said quietly. He rose unsteadily, pathetic hope flickering in his bloodshot eyes. "What you did to me was wrong. The way you treated me, the things you said, that was cruel. And I won't pretend otherwise. I know, and I'm sorry." "I'm not finished." She waited until he fell silent. "But I'm not going to destroy you. That's not who I want to be. If I use my power to hurt you, then I'm still letting you define who I am. And I refuse to do that anymore." She handed him a business card, not a Kang family card, but one for the foundation bearing her name. "We have programs for people in crisis, job training, counseling, financial planning. If you're genuinely committed to becoming a better person, they can help. But this is your only chance. If you waste it, if you go back to being the man who hurt people to feel powerful, you're on your own." She turned and walked away without looking back, toward her brothers, toward her future, toward the life she had built with her own 2 hands. In the years that followed, Soo-Yeon's story became legend. She expanded her design company across Asia, then Europe, then the world. Her foundation helped hundreds of thousands of people rebuild their lives. She wrote a memoir that topped bestseller lists in 15 countries and gave speeches that moved millions to tears and action. But she never forgot who she had been. Every year on the anniversary of that rainy night, the night she had sat crying behind a garbage bin, believing her life was over, she returned to that same alley. She would stand there for a few minutes, remembering the woman who had lost everything and found the courage to start again. He had humiliated her with another woman. He had destroyed her belief in herself. He had told her she was worthless, invisible, nobody. But he had been wrong. She was Kang Soo-Yeon, daughter, sister, designer, founder, force of nature, and she had destroyed nothing less than the chains of her own making. The end. Playlist classification. Primary playlist. Secret identity revealed. PLSEC. Secondary playlist. Revenge and justice stories. PL Rev. Keywords: secret identity, brothers, CEO, humiliation, revenge, transformation, heiress, revealed, destroyed, karma. But the story doesn't end there. Let me tell you about the day everything changed for the second time. 3 years after her transformation, Soo-Yeon was sitting in her corner office at Kang Design Studio's new headquarters, a building she had designed herself, a 20-story tower of glass and steel that had become an architectural landmark in Gangnam. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across her desk, covered with blueprints and fabric samples and the latest issue of Architectural Digest, which featured her work on the cover. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Kang, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. She says her name is Lee Hye-jin." The name didn't ring any bells, but something in her assistant's voice made Soo-Yeon curious. "Send her in." The woman who entered was in her early 60s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that held decades of sorrow. She was dressed simply but neatly, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. When she saw Soo-Yeon, tears immediately began streaming down her weathered face. "It's really you," the woman whispered. "After all these years, it's really you." Soo-Yeon stood slowly, something stirring in her memory. "Do I know you? You wouldn't remember me. You were only 6 months old the last time I saw you. I was the one who took you." The world seemed to stop. Soo-Yeon gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles turning white. "What did you say?" The woman, Hye-jin, sank into a chair, her body shaking with sobs. I was the nanny. Your family's nanny. I had been working for them for 3 years when a man approached me. He offered me more money than I had ever seen in my life. Enough to save my mother, who was dying and needed surgery we couldn't afford. All I had to do was leave the back door unlocked one night and look the other way for 10 minutes. She buried her face in her hands. I didn't know they were going to take you. I thought they were just going to rob the house. When I realized what had happened, it was too late. They threatened to kill my mother if I talked. They threatened to kill me. So I ran. And I've been hiding ever since, living with the guilt, watching from afar as your family fell apart. When your mother died, I wanted to die too. I almost did. Soo-Yeon should have felt rage. She should have felt hatred. This woman had stolen her childhood, had caused her mother's death, had sentenced her to years of abuse and loneliness. But looking at Hyejin's broken form, all she could feel was a strange, unexpected compassion. Who hired you? Who was behind the kidnapping? Hyejin looked up, her eyes red and swollen. I never knew his real name. But 3 months ago I saw him on television. He's dead now. Died in prison last year. He was part of a larger organization. People who targeted wealthy families for ransom. Something went wrong with your case. The person who was supposed to negotiate the ransom disappeared with you, sold you to an orphanage to cover his tracks. By the time anyone figured out what happened, you were already lost in the system. How did you find me? Your story has been all over the news. The lost Kang heiress, found after 23 years. I knew I had to come. I had to tell you the truth. I had to beg for your forgiveness, even though I know I don't deserve it. Soo-Yeon sat in silence for a long moment, processing this revelation. Her aunt, the woman she had grown up believing was her only family, had known nothing about her true origins. The orphanage had given her a false background, a fabricated history. Everything she had believed about herself had been a lie built on a crime. Stand up, she said finally. Hyejin rose unsteadily, clearly expecting condemnation, possibly even legal action. Instead, Soo-Yeon walked around her desk and did something that surprised them both. She embraced the trembling woman. I forgive you, she whispered. You were a victim too. You made a terrible choice, but you've carried the weight of it for 23 years. That's punishment enough. Hyejin collapsed against her, sobbing harder. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, and I believe you. Soo-Yeon pulled back, holding the woman at arm's length. The foundation I started. It helps people who have been trapped by their circumstances, who have made mistakes they can't undo. Let us help you. Let me help you find peace. That afternoon, Soo-Yeon called an emergency family meeting. She told her father and brothers everything Hyejin had revealed. There were tears, there was anger, there was grief revisited. But in the end, the Kang family made a decision together. They would not pursue legal action against Hyejin. She had suffered enough. Instead, they would focus on healing, on closure, on building a future that honored the mother and wife they had lost. The investigation into the kidnapping ring led to the exposure of a decades-old criminal network. Dozens of families who had lost children received closure. Some, like the Kangs, even received miracles. Children found, identities restored, families reunited across impossible distances. Soo-Yeon's story became not just a tale of personal redemption, but a symbol of what was possible when pain was transformed into purpose. She established a new division of her foundation, dedicated to finding missing children and reuniting families. The work was slow, painstaking, often heartbreaking. But when it succeeded, when a parent held their lost child for the first time in years or decades, every sacrifice was worth it. On the 5th anniversary of that rainy night in Gangnam, Soo-Yeon stood at the podium of the United Nations, addressing delegates from 193 countries. She was there to speak about human trafficking, about the importance of international cooperation in protecting the vulnerable, about the resilience of the human spirit. "I stand before you today as living proof that no one is ever truly lost," she said, her voice carrying across the vast assembly hall. "I was stolen from my family as an infant. I spent 23 years believing I was unwanted, unloved, worthless. I was told by people who should have protected me that I would never amount to anything, that I should be grateful for crumbs of affection, that my dreams were ridiculous. But here is what I have learned. The people who try to diminish us are wrong. Every single one of them. You are not defined by your circumstances, by your critics, by the cruelty of those who should have loved you. You are defined by how you rise when you fall, by the choices you make when everything seems hopeless, by the person you decide to become when the world tells you to stay small. I was humiliated by a man who didn't know my worth. Today, I run a foundation that has helped hundreds of thousands of people discover theirs. I was told I would never amount to anything. Today, I speak to the leaders of the world about the power of transformation. I was made to feel invisible. Today, I am seen. And if I can do it, if a woman who spent 23 years believing she was nobody can become someone who stands before you today, then anyone can. Anyone. So I say to every person listening who has been told they are worthless, every person who has been broken by circumstances beyond their control, every person who has given up hope, rise. Rise up. Rise above. The world needs your light, even if you can't see it yet. Especially if you can't see it yet. Your story is not over. It is only beginning. The applause that followed echoed through the halls of power. But Soo-Yeon wasn't thinking about the dignitaries or the cameras or the headlines that would follow. She was thinking about a woman sitting in the rain behind a garbage bin, utterly defeated, utterly alone. And about the stranger who had stopped when no one else would. She was thinking about second chances, and the power of one moment of kindness to change everything. She was thinking about the person she had been, and the person she had become. And she was thinking about all the people out there, right now, sitting in their own metaphorical alleys, waiting for someone to see them. This was her purpose now. This was why everything had happened the way it did. To prove that transformation was possible. To show that broken things could be made whole. To be the hand reaching out in the darkness. The voice saying, "You matter." The proof that tomorrow could be different from today. She was Kang Soo-Yeon. And her story, the true story, the story of becoming, was still being written. The end years later, on a rainy night, much like the one that had changed everything, Soo-Yeon received an unexpected visitor at her home. She was sitting in her study, reviewing plans for the foundation's newest project, a residential complex for families transitioning out of poverty, when her housekeeper informed her that someone was waiting at the gate. Someone who refused to leave until she agreed to see them. It was Jun-soo. She almost turned him away. It had been 7 years since the gala. 7 years since she had given him that business card and walked away. She had heard, through various channels, that he had used the foundation's resources, had completed the counseling programs, had found a modest job at a small accounting firm. She had heard that he had remarried, a kind woman who had her own complicated past, and that they had a young daughter together. She had heard that he had become, against all odds, a decent human being, but she had never sought him out. That chapter was closed. Now here he was, standing in her doorway, rain dripping from his umbrella, looking nothing like the arrogant man who had humiliated her in that restaurant so many years ago. He looked smaller, somehow, humbler, more human. 5 minutes, she said. That's all I can give you. They sat across from each other in her sitting room, a careful distance between them. He didn't try to touch her, didn't try to bridge the gap. He simply sat, his hands folded in his lap, and spoke. I'm not here to apologize again. I said everything I needed to say years ago, and I know words don't erase what I did. I'm here because... My daughter asked about you. Soo-Yeon raised an eyebrow. Your daughter? She's 5 now. Her name is Min-ah. She saw your speech at the UN on television. Her teacher showed it in class, and she came home asking questions. She wanted to know about the woman who talked about second chances, about becoming someone new, and I had to tell her the truth. He took a shaky breath. I told her that I knew you once, that I hurt you badly, that I was a different person then. A small, cruel person who made himself feel big by making others feel small. I told her that you taught me something important, even though I didn't deserve the lesson. What lesson was that? That cruelty is a choice, that who we are isn't fixed. We can change if we want to badly enough. That forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't about saying what someone did was okay. It's about refusing to let their darkness become your darkness. He met her eyes for the first time. You gave me a second chance when I deserved nothing. I'm trying to be worthy of it now. Every day I try. Soo-Yeon was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. Then she smiled. A small smile, but genuine. Tell your daughter something for me, she said. Tell her that everybody makes mistakes. Everybody hurts people, sometimes without meaning to, sometimes on purpose. What matters isn't being perfect. It's what you do after. It's whether you learn, whether you grow, whether you become someone better. Tell her that redemption is possible for anyone willing to do the work. Junsu nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me. Thank the person you're becoming. That's your work, not mine. He left that night, back into the rain, back to his modest life, back to the family he was building on the ruins of the person he used to be. And Soo-Yeon returned to her study, to her plans, to her purpose. The rain continued to fall, but it no longer felt like tears. It felt like cleansing. It felt like renewal. It felt like the beginning of another beautiful story.